Get 5 coffins ready.
Hey everybody, today we're talking about Yasuo in League of Legends versus Susano in SMITE. Susano is a jungling assassin in SMITE who focuses on fast movement and large AoE attacks, and just generally being really annoying. While Yasuo is a mid lane and occasionally top lane fighter in League who focuses on short range jabs and endless dashes, opening up to a sea of possible outplays and, yes, being really annoying. To clear any ideas of bias, Susano and Yasuo are my favorite characters in their respective games, and while I prefer SMITE on the whole, Yasuo is still one of my all-time favorite characters to play as. Now I'm not here to talk about an in-lore fight. I don't think I need to convince anyone that Susano could kinda just scratch his armpit and Yasuo would evaporate. I mean, the guy's literally a god, so no contest there. That also brings up the in-game element of items. Basically, should I consider full builds or not? I decided not to because not only would this be extremely messy since you could just make the argument for your favorite character having the perfect build to deal with the other character, but Yasuo would also definitely win. League of Legends items are just way stronger than anything SMITE has to offer, and it's not even close. Can you imagine Chernobog with Immortal Shield Bow? Well, anyways, that brings me to another issue, Yasuo's double crit chance passive. If you don't already know, essentially, Yasuo's passive boils down to get 2 crit items, you get 100% crit chance with reduced crit damage. So, obviously, this has a huge impact on Yasuo's damage output, as he relies on critting on both his basic attacks and that jab attack I mentioned earlier. But the way I see it, Susano is equally impacted, as his base damage is rather lackluster, but is heavily amplified by high power scaling and of course on-hit items, being able to proc on-hit items 5 times total thanks to his passive. Speaking of passives, let me give a quick rundown of their abilities. I'll be skipping over the unimportant little tidbits, so if you want a more in-depth look at the characters, I've left resources in the description. Yasuo builds passive meter by moving around. Once at max passive, the next instance of damage dealt to him by an enemy champion pops the passive and grants him a 475 health shield for 1 second. In Yasuo's first ability, he jabs forward, dealing damage to all enemies hit and gains a stack on his first ability if it hit any enemy. At 2 stacks, his next usage of the ability will throw a small tornado which deals damage and knocks up all enemies, essentially creating 3 stages, the first 2 being normal jabs and the final stage being that tornado. Yasuo's second ability fires out a non-damaging wall which blocks all incoming projectiles. This is one of the main reasons I'm breaking down Yasuo first, because I want to mention what in Susano's kit I think this wall would realistically block. But yeah, other than that, big wall that blocks projectiles from all sources other than towers. Moving on. Yasuo's third ability allows him to dash to any enemy currently visible. Subsequent dashes in short succession will build up the amount of damage dashes deal. Even better though, if Yasuo casts his first ability while dashing, at the end of the dash he will spin around himself, casting whatever version of the Q he currently has. So if he's at his first or second stage, he will strike in the AoE, and if he's in the final stage, he'll strike and knock up all enemies around him. Now this leads to some ridiculous combos, especially when you take flash into account. So for the purposes of this video, I will include summoner spells and by extension relics in SMITE. Yasuo's ultimate allows him to teleport to any nearby enemies who are currently knocked up, knocking them up further and then slamming them down, dealing damage to them and resetting his passive meter to 100%. As the third stage of Yasuo's passive is his only knockup, he has to get crafty to get this ultimate off, but it's most certainly doable in a number of situations I'll discuss later. For now, Susano. Susano's passive is very simple. After 4 instances of damaging from his abilities, the ticks in his third ability only counting once, his next ability deals bonus damage. Super simple. Less simple is his first ability. Susano fires once in a cone, then in an AoE around him, then dashes forward. All of these stages deal damage and can be, or in the case of this battle will be cancelled to get an auto attack in before casting the next part of this ability. Susano's second ability damages and pulls all enemies in the center of this cone, and that's about it. I don't think that this ability will be stopped by Yasuo's wind ball ability. However, I do think his third ability would. Susano shoots forward a small storm. This storm clings onto the first enemy that is hit by it, and Susano can teleport to the storm at any time, whether or not it's clung onto an enemy. So this is Susano's best way to get on Yasuo and follow him through his insane dashes. But as I mentioned, it makes sense that if it were an ability in League, Yasuo would be able to stop it with his wind ball. Susano's ultimate sees him wind up a massive typhoon, and Susano may fire the typhoon at any time. However, it grows in size and damage as it's wound up, and if wound up for 1 second or more, it will knock up all enemies hit as well. So unfortunately for my mainest man here, I do think Yasuo will be able to block this ability with his wind wall. Yasuo's wind wall has no special interactions where ultimate abilities pass through it simply because they're ultimates, and crazy big projectiles like Aurelion Sol's Q can still be stopped by it. So unfortunately it makes sense that Yasuo would be able to stop it. One interaction that's tricky is if Yasuo is in the middle of the typhoon, which is where Susano really wants someone, would he still be able to avoid it with the wind wall when he's right in the middle of it? I think if he's in the typhoon, he's in the typhoon. And as far as I can tell, even though it does travel forward, everything that's in the typhoon when it's fired gets hit all at once, and then once fired, becomes a projectile and is then able to be windwalled. So you can let me know what you think in the comments, but I feel like if Yasuo's in that typhoon, he should be eating the damage. Speaking of damage, we need to equalize these characters somehow health and damage wise to get a better idea of what they'd be like in a hypothetical game where they have more relative stats to one another. I'll give a full breakdown in the description, but basically I'm taking the average health of their respective class in each game and comparing that to where Susano and Yasuo lie against those averages, giving them new health and damage numbers to accommodate their new standings. Yasuo's new health value is 2,331, whereas Susano now has 2,332 health in this hypothetical battle, which was crazy to me once I actually finished my calculations, but I digress. I won't be including protections as that could get really messy when doing damage calculations, and I guess I could do the same health calculations thing but with protections this time, but I think I'd actually rather throw myself into a washing machine to do that again, so I'll just ignore protections entirely. So finally, let's get into the nitty gritty of how this matchup would actually go. So in terms of which role they'd be in, let's just make it mid lane to keep it simple and keep minions sort of a factor. They'd be there for sure, mostly for Yasuo's sake so he can, function, but I'm not going to be calculating potential minion damage or anything. They're also going into this with Flash Ignite on Yasuo and Scorching Blink Rune with Temporal Beads for Susano. This should be another obvious one. Yasuo needs summoner spells to function well, and since summoner spells are stronger than relics, I gave Susano upgraded relics. Speaking of what Yasuo needs, you've likely had runes in the back of your mind too. Here, I'll let Yasuo run his signature lethal tempo and then have his 10% attack speed rune. Anything more than that is just unfair, but these two things, Yasuo really needs to get anything done, especially since his first ability's cooldown is only reduced with additional attack speed, so no items and no lethal tempo would mean he'd be... So how would laning go? Well, Yasuo's main game plan while laning is slowly building up his first ability over and over again, and using the threat of hitting the opponent with the jabs or the eventual nado to keep them in check, eventually getting himself in a position to dash into the wave to get confirmed Qs and eventually a nado. So I think this is where Susano can hard counter Yasuo. You see, Yasuo can't really walk up to the wave to Q it without getting into Susano's pull range, so that whole Q back off thing going in when the nado's up isn't really going to work. Basically, as soon as Yasuo walks up, Susano can pull him and should pull him. Using your pull is almost always a guaranteed 3 right after that. But say in this hypothetical scenario, just say both players know the matchup well, and Susano knows if he just 3s as soon as the pull is complete, Yasuo will just be mashing W to try and get his wind wall out to avoid the 3. So this will pop Yasuo's passive shield, which is good and bad, since Susano used his least damaging ability to pop it, but loses the effectiveness of the basic attack he gets after the pull. I think from this point, Yasuo's best move is to auto attack and dash through Susano and dive to the back of the wave. Yas likes to dash through champions first if he can, since this leaves the entire minion wave available to dash through. So let's give Yasuo the benefit of the doubt that he got a Q off and is in the second stage of his Q and dashes away from Susano. Meanwhile, of course, Susano just slaps Yasuo with the first 2 hits of his first ability since, he can't really miss it. I think Yasuo will get to his third stage of his Q and dash back through the minion wave to get back onto his side of the lane, now using the looming threat of the tornado to zone Susano away. I think it's in Susano's best interest just to dash through Yasuo for the extra damage, either as Yasuo tries to get away or the instant Yasuo's EQ for the nado hits at the back of his wave. And let's give him the benefit of the doubt and say he lands a basic attack after dashing. You certainly don't want to dash onto a Yasuo who has nado web, so I think Susano has to do it immediately to avoid getting knocked up and ulted on, which would definitely make him lose. You could make the argument that after dash basic attacking on Yasuo, Susano could use his 3 here, and is so close that Yasuo couldn't react in time. But keep in mind Yasuo can wind wall at any time, even while dashing, so if he sees that coming, even if Susano's on his ass, he'll still be able to wind wall it. At this point, Susano does have his passive ready, but he's got to be careful. He could try to all-in Yasuo, but again, Yasuo has his nado. So for now, I think the two would just back off from one another and wait until the next wave. So to tally up the damage thus far, Susano 2'd and basic attacked, but this was nullified by Yasuo's passive shield. But he was then able to cast his entire first ability and get a basic attack in, dealing 430 damage after damage adjustments, leaving Yasuo at 1901 HP. Yasuo wasn't able to do much, but he was able to get 1 Q, a basic attack, and a base charge E on Susano, dealing a total of 389 damage after adjustments, leaving Susano at 1943 health. So basically the same HP. I think the next round, and by extension most sequences I can think of, go a similar way. Well, here comes the next wave, where things will get a little more spicy. Keep in mind Yasuo has no passive meter, so no shield this time at the start. Doing the Frosty X special on Yasuo won't work since Yasuo can windwall the Typhoon. So instead what I do, while Yasuo is standing out of dash range from my minion wave, is blink through him with Scorching Blink and basic attack, which in my experience always takes at least 3 times, so that's what I'll calculate for damage. Yasuo would immediately respond with an auto Q, auto Q, while Susano would begin his Storm Kata combo, dashing through him and getting away from the impending tornado. However, since Susano is near the minion wave with Yasuo having a tornado Q primed, he can perform a Beyblade, which is EQ flashing to perform an instantaneous knockup. Yasuo would then auto attack and then ult. So as far as Smite's concerned, with ults like Yasuo's, you can generally beads out of them, so I'm gonna say Susano can beads out of it but still takes the damage. but cleansing it still gives Susano an advantage, as while Yasuo is stuck in the ult animation, Susano gets dropped out of it and can start charging his ultimate. I think by this point Yasuo would ignite Susano, but nah, Susano's ult is coming. I think he would be able to fire this and get a basic attack out, which Yasuo now has passive shield back from ulting to almost completely immune it. Oh. So to tally up, Susano dealt 954 damage after calculations, leaving Yasuo at 947 HP. Yasuo dealt, holy shit, 1,779 damage after calculations, leaving Susano at just 164 health. Even if you want to say that Susano got his third ability and 2 basic attacks off during the first trade, or take away Yasuo's ult damage since Susano cleansed it, and maybe give Susano a bit more damage by slapping his 3 on Yasuo after ulting since Yasuo is knocked up and can't win ball and thereby pop his passive onto his second trade, his and Yasuo's damage become neck and neck. Except Yasuo can keep on going in the trade, whereas Susano is basically completely out of tricks at that point. I think in general, Susano just can't really deal with Yasuo due to Yasuo's relentlessness. Susano can deal with Yasuo's bullshit every 15 seconds or so. Meanwhile, Yasuo is just constantly harassing Susano and making it impossible for him to maintain any semblance of lane pressure. Even putting items back into the equation, Yasuo's shield really makes even a full insane burst combo from Susano manageable for Yasuo. And once that CC is over, Yasuo easily outtrades him damage-wise with insane crits, lifesteal, and naturally another shield from Immortal Shield Bow. So I think Yasuo takes this medium difficulty with no items and low difficulty with items. And I think in those flashier, no pun intended, moments where he's able to get his ult off and can get that second passive shield, there's really nothing Susano could do in a one-on-one, unfortunately. I think as I wrote this, I noticed that Yasuo is just really hard to deal with if you're A, not ranged, or B, not tanky. And in my experience in game, with League, this holds up. Susano's laning isn't awful, but I knew as soon as I realized that Yasuo's passive shield would almost completely immune entire abilities from Susano that he was going to have a rough go of it, especially with those painful cooldowns. Speaking of writing this video probably came as like a big question mark moment for a lot of you, and honestly it's just a video I've been wanting to do for a long time. Doing those calculations to try and normalize the characters was a pain, but I love trying to figure out how matchups for characters in games other than their own would go. So if you like this video, let me know if you'd ever want any more. Also, I have one non-SMITE video and then a 5-part SMITE series of videos coming, and both of them have been really difficult to write, so I just wanted to make something that I've been thinking about making for a long time to unstick my brain a little bit. But how do you think Yasuo versus Susano would go? Do you agree with my methodology for trying to normalize the characters? Do you think I missed anything in how the matchup should be played? Let me know, and thanks for watching.